Welcome to the Nickolas and Natali Show, where we chat with entrepreneurs, experts, and entertainers to help you live a more fulfilling life and take your business to the next level. Today, we're chatting with Travis Chappell. Travis is the CEO of Guestio.com. It's like Cameo for podcast appearances, and he is the host of the top 25 business podcast, Build Your Network, which he's currently rebranding to Travis Makes Friends. He's coined the term interview marketing, cracking the code on how entrepreneurs can build, grow, and monetize their podcasts through creating the right relationships. He's connected with people like Shaq, Manny Pacquio, Josh Peck, and many more high-profile individuals. Before we dive in, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share this episode with a friend that you know would benefit from it. And the reason is, these episodes, we're going uninterrupted, no ads. So believe it or not, your shares and reviews help me reach out to guests, which will in turn bring you more value on how to live a fulfilling life. Riddle of the week: how do moths swim? Stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out. That was the intro. Now here is the episode. We're starting at the early beginnings.
Okay.
You're born in Lancaster, California. I lived right down the road from you in Victorville, California. Not sure if you knew.
Oh.
Small world here.
Beautiful Victorville.
On the way to Vegas. Can't beat it.
Oh yeah. I still drive. I drive that drive, dude. Like, I don't know, at least once a month, probably. We literally just drove it because I still have a lot of family that lives out in the AV Antelope Valley for non-locals.
Nice.
So yeah, we drive from Vegas because I live in Vegas now. So Vegas to AV back to Vegas. Yeah, we'd make that drive pretty frequently. Go through Adelanto and Lake LA and all the backcountry roads. Yeah.
Dang, that's nice. I hope you're staying away from 7th Street, but you probably see the Cracker Barrel. There you go. We got some things brewing up there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Booming, dude. Booming.
Booming economy. If the Aldi's coming in, it's great. But here we go. You graduated kindergarten on the same campus you graduated college from, and you worked your way in the same place K through 12, and you didn't leave there until you're 21. I want to know, because it's probably somewhat similar upbringing to what I had. What are you grateful for growing up in a small circle, and what do you feel was absent from your upbringing growing up in that kind of environment?
It's a good question, man, and I think that it's phrased correctly because there's pros and cons to everything, and so I'll answer the pros list first. Pros being, some of my friends are, they're lifelong friends. They're more like brothers than they are friends. We've known each other since we were 4 years old. We went through a lot of stuff together. We actually, mostly 3 or 4 of us, we kind of believe the same things now. So we've all kind of transitioned away from where we were, when we were growing up, what our parents taught us and stuff like that. The type of bond that you have with people like that is, like I said, we don't get the opportunity to hang out often. I live in Vegas and I do what I do, which is a crazy busy schedule, and they live in Southern California still. And they all have 9 to 5s, very kind of traditional, more traditional type paths. So we don't get to hang out often, but when we do, it's just like hanging out with, like I said, your brothers. So that's definitely one big pro. Another pro being, since it was all in that church world, I started speaking publicly when I was 12. So I started going to preaching camps and did preaching contests, did humorous speeches, duet acting, high school plays, dramas, just was up in front of people talking and communicating from the time that I was 12 to 21. And so there was a lot of good that came out of that as well. And then the other side, the cons list, is fairly extensive itself. I think the biggest culprit would probably be lack of opportunity and lack of awareness, because it's very much, I tell people all the time, like I can't bring myself to call it a cult necessarily, because I feel like I see other people in different cults and I'm like, that seems like way more culty vibes than what I grew up in. But, maybe I only think that because I grew up in it. But anyway, I call it a bubble because very much to me, it was a bubble. Graduated kindergarten, the same campus I graduated college from. It was the same campus where our church was. There's this big 40-acre compound that I spent 7 days a week at growing up. My teachers are my youth leaders. My youth leaders were my teachers. The principal was at the church. Like, everybody that worked at the school was a tithing member of the church. You couldn't go to the school unless you were a member of the church. So it was a closed enrollment school. It wasn't even an open enrollment private Christian school. It was a closed enrollment private Christian school. So you couldn't just be a member of the community and pay to put your kids in the school. You had to be a member of the church there, and meet certain requirements and things like that. So they were very careful of influences coming in your life. Like, it wasn't like the college that was there was ministerial. It was, but it wasn't like seminary, meaning like there weren't other opinions given about what the Bible said or what it had to say. And there weren't other religious books offered. There weren't other perspectives or denominations that were represented at all. Like, when we graduated college, we had to stand up saying that we agreed with the doctrinal statement of the college. And if we didn't, they would not hand us our diploma.
Oh my gosh.
So it was very much like a we're right, everybody else is wrong type of mentality. So, like I said, I think being open to perspective, that was something that was totally lost in everybody there. When we were in high school, there wasn't a career counselor that taught us about these other different career paths. And if you do this, you can go to this path. And if you want this path, you need to go to this school, and you need to have these types of grades to be able to apply to a school like that. Here's a good grant or a scholarship program that you might be able to become a part of. Zero things like that. So through coming out of our high school, there was basically 3 different paths that almost every single person in, I guess 4 different paths really. And so the first one was ministry. So like all they really wanted to know is like, do you want to go to ministry? You don't want to go to ministry. That was it. Because if you want to go in ministry, there wasn't here's a bunch of options of Bible colleges you can go to. It was here's the application to the colleges on our campus, because why would you go anywhere else? So there wasn't even options in terms of the options. You know what I mean? It was like, If you're going to do ministry, here's an application, go here. And then the other paths were basically the local junior college, Antelope Valley College, or the military. And then the fourth option, the fourth light option would be just not going to school or doing anything and just like becoming, like I've several friends that just became prison guards or, public officials or whatever, like a cop or working at Northrop or something like that. Just because, like I said, there was just they didn't tell us anything, and there was never. I never knew that these other options existed or that kids were getting this type of advice. There was a lot of limiting factors in terms of what we were able to like accomplish at a young age. And so, yeah, there lots of some pros, but also, good fair amount of cons as well.
Wow. Did you have any, I'm curious, since the vision for your life that you have right now, and then eventually in your story that you have is so big, the dreams are so big, was there something in the back of your mind that was like, I know I can do big things, I just don't know what they are? Or was it just like, I'm buying into this, like whatever you're feeding me, I'm in it, I'm with you?
That was what it was, because I'm very much like an all-in kind of a person. I still had big dreams at the time. It was just big dreams in the ministry. You know what I mean? Like I still wanted to do things that most people didn't think that they could do. The difference was one of the detriments of that world, the way that we grew up, was that they made it seem so abstract, the way that you could have success in that world. So, for instance, the church that I went to in Lancaster, the pastor that took it over, coincidentally has the same exact last name as I do. Same spelling, same everything.
Oh my gosh.
But no relation at all. So his name's Paul Chappell. He took that church in 1986. He took over that church with 12 members. They had 12 members at a crappy little church in downtown Lancaster. They now have a 40-acre campus. I think even more than that, maybe 60 acres or 80 acres or something like that. Several multi-million-dollar buildings, 7,000 or 8,000 members in the church. When I was at the college, there was almost 1,000 students there. There's almost 400 students, K through 12. They have a publishing ministry. They have just so many things that are going on there. And growing up, it was always like, well, the hand of God was just on, Paul Chappell. The hand of God's on Paul Chappell. Now that I'm an adult and I have the ability to think critically for myself, I can look at it and so clearly point to the fact that this guy was knocking, when he started the church, when he took over the church, he started knocking 500 doors a week, inviting people to come to church in addition to his pastoral duties. And so like, I'm looking at all these other pastors who are across all the country. They never do that kind of stuff. If they do, it's on Saturday morning for a half an hour. They do visitation and then they go back home. It's like, no, the reason that this guy grew this church from nothing is because he worked his ass off to build this church from nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he knocked doors, he brought in members, he got them to tithe, and then that allowed him to go hire a person to start doing that full time, to go knock doors, bring in members, get them to tithe, knock doors, bring in members, get them to tithe, knock doors, bring in members, get them to tithe. Like, it's a big funnel. It's like, it wasn't just like the hand of God was on his life. Like, BS, dude. Like, but when I was growing up at that time, it was just like, when I was looking, I was like, I want to do big things for God, but how do I know if God's hand is on me? And so it would become this thing where it's like this contest of how close can I get to God, instead of like, what are the inputs that I need to do to make sure that the goal that I want to reach is accomplished? Because in that world, like, you're nothing is kind of what they teach, is like, you can't do anything. You need God for everything, type of a thing. And so it messed with my confidence coming out of it. It messed with my, yeah, I was never confident, even like in small things. Like, I played a lot of basketball growing up and stuff, and I would always have difficulty adjusting to the next level of play, not because my skill didn't match up, but because my belief didn't match up. And I was always like so unsure that like, oh, well, God could take this away just as soon as he gave it to me, not putting the pieces together that like, it's not necessarily God giving this to me. It's the fact that I was in the driveway practicing left-handed layups for 3 hours when I was 7 instead of inside playing video games. Like, that's why I'm pretty good at this. Like, I didn't have the ability to be confident in my skill, or confident in the input, confident in the work, to be able to get the output or the dream or the goal that I desired, because that in that world, that was something that just didn't happen. So there's a lot of rewiring that I had to do when I came out of that. But so the dreams were really big inside of that world, and I'm, like I said, I'm just an all in kind of a guy. So I think the dream, whatever I do, I have big dreams, big goals. It just depends on what that belief structure is.
Man, it's almost like God gifted you with the ability to be athletic. You put in the work, and then you're blessed because you put in the work. You know, God can bless what you're doing.
Right.
I'm definitely with you. There's a lot of things growing up that I've took on from the church that definitely needed some rewiring, of just things that just were a little misaligned. What did rewiring your belief system look like as you got older? Because it's not easy. 17, 18, maybe 20 years of your life, you believed one way, and now suddenly you're faced with, I think there's something else here that I need to restructure.
Yeah, from the time that I can remember until the time that I was an adult, that's how things were. And it wasn't just even when I was an adult. It was like, I'm working full time now. I just bought my first house, and I'm married. I got married semester before I graduated college. So it was like, I have a wife, I have bills to pay, I have a mortgage, and now all these questions about like my fundamental core foundational belief to my entire life structure is like starting to shake and crumble a little bit underneath me. And it was definitely a scary time, bro. I don't know how to even explain how I rewired my belief set from there. But a lot of it had to do with just like, I call them cracks in the dam, because my whole life it was just like this dam was being fortified, that this was the one thing, this was the truth, and anything else opposed to this is wrong, even if it's like close. It's not the same. Like, we wouldn't, because we were independent fundamental Baptist, we wouldn't even associate with Southern Baptists because they were too liberal for us.
Yeah.
And so it was like, everybody else is wrong. It's not like, if I tell people all the time, if I grew up like community church Christian, I probably would still be community church Christian, because I would have never been forced into this like pocket of polarity that existed inside of the world that I grew up in. But because that was how I grew up, it was like, when I got out into the real world and started interacting with normal people on a regular basis, I started to realize that like how abnormal I was, and that I didn't view there being much of a purpose behind how abnormal it was. It just seemed like there's a lot of stuff that I've just been told no about, and I don't really have a reason why I think that, except for that I've just been told no my whole life. I can't really prove it from this. I don't really know that that's true. And this is like right out of Bible college, like fresh like Bible college graduate with a double major in Bible and church ministries, like passed all my tests, my exams, everything. And still would, like I said, get in these conversations with just normal people, regular people. And I started to realize like there was just little cracks in the dam that started to form over time, which was like, oh, I thought that if you drank or you smoked or you cussed, that you were just a bad person. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was impossible for that person to feel love, to offer love, to do any good in the world, because they're just bad people to their core, and they need the grace of Jesus to come in and help them not be a bad person anymore, so that they can love, because God is love, and without God there's no love, and if you don't know God, you don't know love. And it was just like, when I would witness firsthand these people that were like, to me, they were good people. They were doing good things in the world. They loved their family, the people closest to them. They They were productive members of society. Like, they didn't judge other people for the way that they decided to live their lives. Like, there was just so many things like that that I started experiencing. And, I'm a believer that experience is what shapes belief when there's no link to the belief. There's no evidence of the belief. Experience will help shape that belief. And so when I started experiencing things that were completely contrary to what I thought was the truth, like I said, it was a little crack in the dam, then another crack in the dam. The crack gets a little bit bigger. Water starts spewing through, and all of a sudden, like, the whole thing comes crumbling down. I say that like it happened in a month, and that was like a 4 or 5 year process.
And during that 4 or 5 years, tell me if I have the timeline correct. This is all during the time you started doing door-to-door sales, and you're building, it seems like, the foundation for your career of sales. But then there's this pivotal moment, and I'm curious what moment or what memories come to mind when you think about what was going on in your life when you made the decision to ditch sales. When you're married, you got a mortgage, there's things on the line. This is all you know is doing door-to-door sales, and you go in a completely new direction. What memories come to mind for that moment?
Yeah. So during that time, I pretty much was done with like the conversation around church. I from what I remember, I would still go, and I never really vocalized it to anybody, but in my mind, I was pretty much moving on and just like, look, I've spent so much time in my life about this, and like I have these other goals and dreams now, and so I just want to focus on those. When I left door to door to do the podcast, to me it was just like it just felt like the right thing to do. It was the only time I've ever done something different for a pay cut.
Wow.
You know, every time in my life leading up to that point, it was all like every time I switched products I was selling, switched companies, did something different, it was always because there was more money on the table. And that was like the motivator for me. It was just like, because I did photography in college to make extra money, which made me more money per hour than when I was doing landscaping. So it was like, all right, well, screw landscaping. I don't need to do physical labor anymore. I can do this photography thing. And I did photography, and it was like, okay, well, I'm doing this door-to-door thing. I can make more money doing door-to-door than photography. It's okay. Well, I'm doing door-to-door appointment setting. Let me do door-to-door closing, and that'll make more money. Okay, well, I'm making more money in this product with this company and this pay structure, so let me go to this company. Well, I'm making more money on this product. Let me go to this company. The only time I've ever like taken a pay cut to do something different was when I stopped door to door to do podcasting, and it was just because I felt like that was going to be the thing that I was going to do next, and it mattered enough to me. So I think this is something that a lot of people aren't willing to do, but at the time we had a 3,600 square foot home in Vegas with a pool and one of the most coveted communities in town, and I was 24, 25. You know, things are going pretty well. I was making a 6-figure income, knocking doors, working 20 hours a week. But at the end of the day, like I said, I didn't want to be doing that anymore. So we broke the lease on the house that we had. We moved in with my brother-in-law. So downsized from this 30 whatever square foot house with a pool and everything, downsized into a 2-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom, 900 square foot apartment with me, my wife, my 2 dogs, big dogs too. I have a German Shepherd and a Great Pyrenees. So my German Shepherd's 80 pounds. My Great Pyrenees is 170 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And then me and my wife, and then my brother-in-law. So we're living in this 2-bedroom, 900 square foot apartment now. But my monthly expenses went from like $3,500 a month for living in terms of like utilities and rent down to about $500 a month. And so I cut my expenses like crazy and focused in on building the podcast business from that point moving forward.
Man, that's a tough decision to start downsizing your life. But I also know that in those decisions, they come from a place of, I guess I'll speak from my own experience. I left my job about a little over a year ago, and I was so frustrated with it. I felt such a lack of purpose with it. I didn't enjoy doing it in the slightest. And there's this teetering line of, I don't want to say desperation, but like a necessity to do something greater or something more in line that you actually want to do.
Yep.
And to make those big decisions and big risks like that, like I can only imagine that's how you were feeling about sales and like being ready to do the next thing.
Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to, dude. It's just like, how much do you want the change? Because everybody else is going to sit there and talk about how much they want to change, but they'll just talk about it, and they'll talk about it forever until they're blue in the face, until the day they retire when they're 65. They'll talk about how they wish they would have done something different, and they'll never do it. And I'm just not the type of person that can do something that I don't like doing. And that's kind of one of the disadvantages / advantages of doing 100% commission door-to-door sales, is that you can't go out and half-ass it and still make money. You know what I'm saying? Like if I was making as much money as I was making at a 9 to 5, and I could just show up to work and collect a paycheck and just be absent the whole time, thinking about other stuff and scheduling things to travel or go do stuff on the weekends with my buddies or whatever, I could understand how that would be kind of a golden handcuffs type of a situation where you feel more trapped from being able to leave, because that's just money that's coming in all the time. It's a big company, big corporation. Like, they don't really care. They're going to pay your paycheck as long as you do the things that you're supposed to be doing. You can half-ass those things. You get a paycheck. Like, you can half-ass your job and get a full-ass paycheck. You know what I'm saying? But with 100% commission door-to-door, you half-ass your job, you get zero paycheck. You know, like, I can't, if I'm not all in on this thing, then I can't overcome objections and do my job effectively and make money. So as soon as I was out of it, it was like, there's not really another option for me. You know what I mean? The option would have been to go get a crappy job, which was just like, well, that's stupid. I'll just do this thing that I want to do anyway.
Yeah, it's very easy to get comfortable quickly. So Build Your Network podcast begins, and I'm going to fast forward a little bit. You've now been in Forbes, Entrepreneur Mag. You've interviewed A-list celebrities. And now I'm going to go back. Who's the first big guest that you got on your podcast that made things click in your mind of like, oh, this is something I can do. This podcast thing has something to it.
Yeah, for me, it was this guy named Grant Cardone.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a polarizing figure, and not everybody knows who he is, but if you're in the business world, you probably know who he is. And at the time, it was a big deal for me because at the time, when I was doing door-to-door, that was like, he was one of the first people I started listening to when I started getting into self-improvement and personal development for me.
Yeah.
Which was like pre-starting my pod. That was when I was like, I know I don't want to do door-to-door, but I don't know what I want to do. And so I started finding people whose content I could consume. Gary Vee was one of them. Grant Cardone was another one of them. And so I was listening to Grant's stuff a lot. I was listening to his books because I was in sales, I was doing door-to-door, and I was like, that was like, you know, it all made sense to me. So I was listening to a bunch of Grant stuff anyway. He was like the first big time business person that was somebody that I did not have any prior connections to that ended up saying yes to coming on the show. And that was like one of the first times where I was like, you have these belief dominoes in your head that every time you knock one over, it's like a big vote of confidence in your ability to make something happen that you previously thought was impossible or at least extremely difficult. And so every time you knock over one of those big belief dominoes, it is a big vote of confidence into yourself to be able to be like, look, if I can make that happen when I didn't, like, if I rewind 2 years ago out and I would have known that this was going to happen now, I'd be like, well, that's crazy. And it's happening now. And so what are some other things that I used to think that way about or currently think that way about that I can go prove that I can do those things too? You know what I'm saying? It's just like one of those big belief curves that happened for me when it was just like, oh, this guy that I've listened to for 2 or 3 years leading up to this, that's actually helped me a lot in the way that I view money, my relationship with money, the things that, a lot of the beliefs that I have around those things that I had to rewire my brain from growing up. Now I'm sitting in studio with him in Miami having like a one-on-one conversation. And it was just like a realization that like, if I could get him, who else can I go get that I maybe don't think that I can get or I think is currently out of reach? And then what else can I tackle that I maybe thought before was impossible or at least improbable?
I think there's some sense of like, I don't want to say lies, but just simply things that are not true that we tell ourselves for no real particular reason of they would never want to come on my show or they're too big to even talk to me, things like that, which that's not a truth.
Right.
None of those things are true. It's simply just reframing in those things so you can actually pursue those things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just it came from a point where I would think of somebody I wanted to interview or think of somebody I wanted to meet or think of this impossible thing and go like, well, that's just impossible. And I started playing this game where if it was just like, I would just say to myself, well, but if it were possible, just assuming it's possible, what would it take? If it were possible, what would it take? It starts reframing your mind to think about problems in a way that's solution oriented rather than giving up on it immediately. Because all of it's just that. It's a problem that you have to solve. It may be a more difficult problem, but it's a problem nonetheless. And how do I solve this problem? And so it starts, like I said, starts putting you in a solution-oriented mindset instead of thinking immediately like, oh, I want to meet this person, I want to interview this person, or I want to accomplish this thing. It's like, oh, well, that's impossible because I have no idea where to start. It's like, yeah, but if it were possible,
Yeah, where would you
just
start?
playing the game, if it were possible, where would I start with this and what would I do? And go do that and see if it works.
I love that. That's a great question. It reminds me, recently I heard this question that's really changed the way I think of things too, is like, what if I wanted this to fail terribly? What are the things that I would do? And then I need to do the opposite. So like if I wanted to have a terrible podcast, I would have terrible audio quality. I would have terrible guests. I would do terrible research. And it's like, okay, now I can just flip that over and I can do all the right things. That's like, it's a cheat code to getting the right checklist.
Yeah, true.
Tell me about one of the first, or maybe one that's meaningful to you, an investment you made in yourself or your podcast that you felt like it was worth it for you to take you to the next level.
Every dollar I've ever invested into myself has paid off at some point. Maybe the most meaningful would be the first time I ever really put a bunch of money into myself, because it was a lot more scary for me because I didn't even know like that stuff existed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like I was following this guy, John Lee Dumas, who's a big business podcaster, and I wanted to learn from him how to start a business podcast. And he did not do coaching anymore at the time. He recommended I talk to a different coach. I hired this coach. But then I saw that John was putting on this mastermind at his house in Puerto Rico. And this was 16, maybe 2017, somewhere in there.
It's like his podcast in paradise kind of deal. Is that what he called it?
Yep.
Something like that.
Yeah, something.
Podcast
something,
in Puerto Rico.
Portapalooza.
Portapalooza.
Portapalooza. Yeah. Is what it was called. But yeah, so Sally's putting on this mastermind. It was going to be like 5 people, 6 people max, but it was $6,500 for the weekend, for like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And like I said, at the time, all I'd ever done was like buy a book or an audiobook. I was so new to investing money into myself, and I didn't like, when I was starting to entertain that dollar amount, I was like, this is crazy, right? Like people don't actually do this. And I started talking to people that were successful and started realizing that a lot of them actually did it. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll see if this is something that I should do, and pulled the trigger. Immediately had buyer's remorse. I'm a pretty frugal person in general. So like I don't buy a lot of, unnecessary things. My weakness is food. I'll pay money for good food. But other than that, like, the clothes that I wear, the things that I buy, the cars that I drive, I'm not a spender. So when I spent that money, I was like, oh my gosh, $6,500. Like, this better be worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't really understand the concept of the fact that like that was an investment. It was not a expense. And that's the problem, is people always look at it as like, I spent that money. It's like, I said that on purpose just now because that's how I looked at it at the time. But really, it was an investment into myself and into my future. And anytime I've invested into myself, like I said, it's always paid off at some point down the road. So that was the first thing, and probably like I said, probably the most meaningful, just because it ended up paying off in tremendous ways. It led to a lot of great connections. I led to a good relationship now. Like now, John is a friend of mine, like a close friend of mine. We've hung out at bachelor parties and weddings, and he wrote a big check for my company, Guestio. He's a minority partner in that company. The check that he wrote's bigger than all the checks I ever wrote him. And I paid him a lot of money for different coaching and experiences and masterminds and referrals to coaching clients through the years. I paid him a good amount of money, and the money he paid me to invest in my company was more than I ever paid to him. And obviously it's not charity. He's there's upside potential for him.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, I would not have had that relationship had I not invested in that 5 years ago. It was $6,500. It's just like, people say that they have these dreams, but they're not willing to invest to the level of their dreams. And that was something that for me was just like a non-negotiable. It was like, if I really want to set myself up to be successful in this, what does it take to be successful in this? And at that time, I wasn't making that much money. I was making 6 figures doing door to door, but that's not that much money. And that first year of my podcast, I filled up a $42,000 credit card. Just events, masterminds, coaching, website, design, whatever.
You name it.
$42,000, it was 0% interest, because like I said, I'm a pretty frugal guy. I have tremendous credit. I do not like messing with my credit.
Yeah.
But it's also a big belief. It's also a big belief thing. when I was putting money on that card and I knew that like the balance of that credit card was becoming greater than my total like cash in my bank account, it makes me nervous. But also it motivates the hell out of me to go make sure that I make enough money to pay that card down before I have to start paying interest on it. So it was like a 12 to 18 month zero interest period. I never had to make an interest payment on the card. I paid it off with business revenue from the podcast that we started and went full time with it within 13 months.
That was the episode. You just listened to it. Travis Chappell giving insights into his journey as an entrepreneur. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Share this episode with a friend you admire most. It takes 5 seconds, great use of your screen time, and it helps us provide even more value to you on the back end. Everybody wins. Say hi to me on Instagram at Nickolas Natali. I reply to every single DM, and I want to know your thoughts. The real reason you're still here, you want to know the answer to the riddle of the week. How do moths swim? Using the butterfly stroke. See, that one you kind of had to have some knowledge on insects. You know, it's not quite the standard riddle. Maybe read up on some picture books about insects and how moths be cocooning and uncocooning and swimming. Thank you for tuning in. See you on Monday at 6 a.m. for part 2. Be kind, be strong, be disciplined. Bye.